What's going on, everybody? Since we pretty much have everything set up prior to doing all this, I don't have to sit here and mess around with a bunch of stuff while we sit on the starting screen. We are back with our most anticipated games of 2020 discussion since last time we kind of got cut off. Plus, this is a huge topic, and we don't have enough time to really talk about all these games, so I figured we'll just tack it on to last week's and discuss some of the other, maybe lesser known games of 2020 that are going to be coming out that we are interested in, because we did have a lot of pretty big ones, the big kahunas talked about last week. So I will go ahead and let my counterparts introduce themselves here. What's going on, guys?
Hello.
If you could introduce yourself, and we'll start off with Bag with his most anticipated game.
Hi, my name is Bagman, and my most anticipated game is still and forever will be Cyberpunk 2077.
Very nice.
I'm Studio Tom, and to go back to last week, my most anticipated game is The Last of Us Part.
Very nice. I'm Lady Rebellion, as always. My most anticipated game is probably Doom Eternal, at least right now, until I see more of Marvel's Avengers and things such as that, Cyberpunk, things like that. Those have all been kind of pushed, so it's like, right now, that's mostly what I'm looking toward is Doom Eternal. That's kind of like the number one thing on my mind, but that could change. By the end of the year, I'd like to see, like, how our opinions sort of change between what we were most anticipated for versus what we actually ended up liking the most for the year. I think that'd be a really interesting discussion. But yeah, awesome. We kind of had this discussion as like a part one last week. Barring any technical issues, we'll continue our discussion this week. If there is anything that you want to cover, Bag, since you weren't there last week, right? Or that was Viper, right?
No, I wasn't here last week.
Okay.
No.
Just check and make sure that my memory isn't faulty like usual. Feel free to hop in with something we've already discussed, because I'm sure we could still have plenty to talk about since this is such a big topic. But we covered a lot of the big ones last week. Cyberpunk, Doom Eternal, Marvel's Avengers, Animal Crossing, things like that. If you want to kind of discuss why that's your most anticipated game, feel free.
I'm happy to discuss old games or newer ones that no one's mentioned yet. I can probably find some somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. What is it about Cyberpunk that kind of gets you excited? Because I know last week I was kind of talking about how I'm excited, but I feel like I'm excited because people want me to be, and not because I actually know anything about the game or like what it's going to be like. I mean, I've kind of heard like preview discussions about it and reviews and things like that, but nothing really in detail. Is there anything about it that's kind of drawing you into it?
Well, I've been a big fan of Dungeons and Dragons and things like that for a while, and the Cyberpunk games are originally it's a D&D type tabletop game, and that's what initially got me excited. And CD Projekt Red are good, high quality developers for games, and I love the Witcher games. And I really just thought this would be a cool game to play. It sounds cool. The systems they've got in place are really nice looking, and everything kind of looks sort of like the ultimate RPG. It really looks like you can build your own character, and a lot of the stuff got me excited. Like smaller things got me excited as well. Like the ability to play as a trans character that got me quite excited.
Yeah.
Just, woo, trans rights! Oh my gosh, it's gonna be
Right?
cool. But so things that got me the one thing that's got me, well, two things got me worried about the game. The delays, that worries me for any game, but also I'm worried about what the public opinion of the game will be, considering that the 18 plus sexual content in the game is fully motion captured and everything.
Ooh, who had that job?
That's what I. So I don't know. I don't know why that was even needed, but it's in there.
Realism, I guess. I mean, props to them for trying to make it as realistic as possible, but at the same time, I mean, I get what you're saying. There's a lot of, like, sometimes I tend to lean back on the fact that, like, oh, games, they should be, like, for everyone or whatever, but then it's kind of like, well, film isn't. Like we've got ranging from G to R to even past that. So it's like, I guess in that way, this is very much a R-rated game, and they're kind of treating it that way, which is
Yeah,
interesting. It's kind of saying like, hey, we're coming out full force, man. Like this isn't like your kiddo's game. Also,
yeah. I
welcome
was about to,
Viper.
Yeah, I was gonna
I was
say,
gonna
I
say,
hope I didn't miss much. I just
No.
realized it's today, and I know it's 1 o'clock.
Oh no, and you barely missed any. We just did introductions, and then Bagman said that Cyberpunk was his most anticipated. So we're kind of going over again like what our initial thoughts were about that game.
Okay.
yeah, I said
Hold on, guys.
Rocksteady was talking about with Red Dead Redemption 2 about how they, spent a lot of time. They wanted to make realistic swinging horse testicles on the horses, and they got, somebody else is like, oh, we got to top that, so we're gonna have real, real sexual
We
activity.
we got a top horse balls, so now we're gonna have human balls. Oh, what's next? Robot balls? I mean, it's interesting because it's like, yeah, like I think games are getting more and more realistic every year that they come out, which is like amazing, especially considering the texture and everything else. VR, games are getting so realistic to the point where now, like, we're having to kind of dive into some of those realistic situations. It's like, people gotta bang, so we gotta show this in the game, kind of thing. Uh, of course, this isn't the first game to have like some sort of sexual encounter, but I will be interested to see how far they really take it. Like, is this gonna be full fledged like porno shit going on? Like,
GTA.
Is it a
yeah, because
cutscene
I
too? They're
mean,
gonna
we've
try to make
had
some kind of
like,
minigame out of
Yeah, it reminds me of the what was it, like the coffee thing that happened way back in like what,
it. Oh
GTA
yeah, yeah, that hot
4,
coffee thing. Yeah.
3, something like that.
Sandra
what's the
talking
coffee
about.
thing? I'm scared.
Oh,
You don't want to know.
Oh God.
It was something that I guess the developers did where like one of the characters could have sex with a woman or something like that. It wasn't supposed to be readily available in the game. You had to use like a developer code or something to like get into developer mode or something like that. It was hidden in the game. It wasn't meant for the average player to do, and some people figured it out, so they ended up having to like reissue the game that had this code removed.
What? What? Oh God.
Yeah, it was
But
removed from any final products.
Oh
it looks
no.
really ridiculous though too. I ended up seeing a video on YouTube. It doesn't even look like that realistic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, I know that you can like go to like the strip club and get a little like lap dance. I think there's like some
Oh,
boobage,
and there's also
but
private dances at
yeah,
apartment.
yeah,
Actually,
exactly. So
get that
like
far.
it's kind of like implied like okay, like you're just doing a little dance. Who knows what happens after that? Now, granted, I think in this story it opened up on Trevor's side, just him straight up banging a chick on like the kitchen counter. So I mean, again, this isn't like unheard of, but it does make me wonder, like, because I mean, that kind of thing will be thrown into games, but it's not usually like something that's a long sequence. Like, it's usually just like, oh, okay, yeah, they were having sex and then now they're done or whatever. It's like in Witcher, I think they kind of allude to that a lot with him, like, picking up prostitutes or
They
whatever.
d-
It's
they
kind
did.
of like, yeah, okay, like it's in there. I hope that it's not like a big deal. I hope they don't like have prostitutes laying around everywhere. You can just take them to the back alley and bang or something. Like that's a little much for me. It's gritty, don't get me wrong, but it's also like, come on, like I don't need that.
I mean, they also kind of did it in like some of the older God of War games.
Mm,
Like, it would be like with one of the other goddesses, I
right.
guess. So,
Yeah. I mean,
it's still not as bad as fully motion captured sex
right. That's
scenes.
what
yeah,
makes me
true.
wonder. It's just like, yeah, like what are we gonna be seeing here exactly? But yeah, that's
But
interesting.
put
They've
you
they've
put the
confirmed
motion
that
capture
there'll
dots
be.
in no man's land.
Well, that's what. Besides the awkwardness in the game, just if you got like porn stars that would have sex with the motion capture stuff, just imagine it with like the motion capture suits. It's got to make that even.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it'll be really interesting to see how Cyberpunk kind of pushes the boundaries and blurs the lines between like, that sort of realism and like video game and stuff like that. I from the Witcher series that they did before, like I'm definitely expecting a lot from them in terms of like RPG and whatnot. So that's definitely on my list. It's more like I pushed it down just because I felt like I haven't seen enough of it, but I'm sure since they have pushed it back that we will be seeing plenty of it as we get closer because that is like everyone's top like number one anticipated game right now since it's so kind of like shrouded in mystery and there's a big pedigree they have to live up to. So it'll definitely be interesting. And in terms of that, Last of Us is also another one that I think is going to be like kind of like a blockbuster film sort of situation where people are really going to be looking and having high expectations for that game, especially since the first one was already like gorgeous. I think the second one's going to be really cool looking as well. And they got some big shoes to fill in terms of storyline. So those are like I consider those to be kind of like the pillars of this year in terms of what people are looking toward.
Hmm.
Yeah, I said last week. I'm really worried that The Last of Us 2 won't be able to live.
Live up to his predecessor.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just it's got, like I said, a high bar has been set. So,
it's hard to follow, and like the thing is like, story making, it's so easy to get started and to get in the middle and get a bunch of crazy shit happening, but then ending it is the hardest part because you got to take all those loose threads and somehow make a sweater out of it. And it's just like a lot of people fail at that. A lot of people, it's always at the end or people are disappointed. So I don't know if this is going to be the ending for Last of Us, but if it is, I think they really need to tie it up in a way that they're going to leave people satisfied. But at
And
the same time, I mean, Naughty Dog is a very good developer. I'm not too worried about it, but I will be interested to see what people's opinion of it is because sequels typically don't do as well, don't have as high of like acclaim in people's minds anyway. Maybe it's like a nostalgia thing, but that seems to be the way, at least in film and things like that. Like sequels are always looked down upon. So we'll see. I think video games are a little different since the technology gets better. So typically the video games get better as they go along, but they'll definitely have to live up to the story and the all the actions and the big situations that happened in the first one.
mhm.
yeah,
and I bet you any money it's gonna be another. It's gonna be basically like a Avengers Endgame situation because of the fact that it's coming to an end of a really good game, and you become so emotionally attached to all the characters that were in the first game. And if like any of them were to get killed off, like just as pure speculation, it could basically bring tears to the lights of gamers. Just saying.
Oh yeah, for sure.
was there
And
been anything confirmed if it is the end of the story though? Because I don't think I've seen any.
I'm just saying, like, if they were to do it, like, even if it's not the end of the game, like, if they were to do it.
yeah, and it all comes down to kind of like how they leave it open ended if they're going to leave themselves some room for a third because I know we kind of discussed last week like if they do push it to a part 3, it's like are they just going to try to draw out this story of Ellie and kind of make it like watered down just to make it like last longer, or are they going to still be able to give us like a super strong second part and a strong third part, or are they just going to drop off altogether and be like this is the end, The Last of Us IP is not dead with Ellie, I don't think, in my opinion. You could show her her story, but I could totally see them being like, "Hey, we made a lot of money off of this. We could totally spin off to a whole different people's perspective, and it could still be really interesting in that world. They don't have to leave that world alone, so they still have some opportunities. But I'm really hoping that they don't decide to just drag it out for nothing, for money's sake or whatever else. Like they definitely
Yeah,
need to do it
definitely
right.
that. Yeah,
But yeah,
like if it comes to a natural conclusion, then end it and don't extend it.
right, yeah, because you don't want to do that to like a beloved like character. Just drag it out just because people really want to see some more Ellie. It's like now. But at the same time, like true artists, I think understand like when stories are done. And I think that they will sort of recognize that because, like I said, they could continue the IP in a different way without having to ruin the part that like people really loved about it, the story and whatnot, without like really like spoiling what was good about it, but continue what people liked, the world and everything else. There are, I'm sure, plenty of other characters they could probably like dive into. or just completely spin off and like have a completely different person. It kind of reminds me of like Walking Dead, for instance, where it's like, you know, you have like the main line comic books which turned into the show and things like that. But then now you've got like, maybe, let's see, you have at least two other video game spin-offs and then a show spin-off, and then I think they said they might have even made like another show spin-off, which I'm like, stop it. But like, it just goes to show that, like, you know, certain worlds don't have to be like the one storyline. As long as you build it out into this like grand idea, you could throw in multiple different kinds of people and people are gonna be like into it, you know. So it'll be interesting. I also kind of worry that like the zombie thing has been sort of played out since then. I think around the time that Last of Us came out, it was kind of like at a high fever pitch with Walking Dead and other sort of IP like that. I know I personally am kind of like I used to be really into The Walking Dead, and then I just kind of was like, okay, I like there's like 10,000 seasons of this. I am like over it. So I'm hoping that they can still make zombies cool because they were like really interesting. They weren't the typical zombie. You had like multiple different kinds of zombie and stuff like that, and it was still more about the humans than the zombies. So I hope that they can continue to make it fresh as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, and I feel like everyone like kind of leans toward, you know, sort of story-based things. I, on the other hand, my most anticipated game is Doom, which is just like not really story-based. I know that they said that they want to get back into more of the story and kind of like make it significant in this next Eternal installment. But at the same time, like, I play Doom because I just want to shoot a bunch of creepy demon aliens in the head. Um,
Yeah, the
so
basics of Doom was never really story. It was just kind of like go around and shoot.
yeah, like gory, messy, like like
Like, when they made the
awesomeness.
Doom movie, like I said that like this is kind of stupid, but then I'm like, but how can you really, yeah, like make a movie off of Doom? I said its story pretty much was, you know, a guy just goes around and shoots demons from.
Hmm.
Like other than that, you don't really have much of a story. So I said, yeah, I guess you can't really blame them for like trying to do something.
Yeah, well, because yeah, it's like it's a big franchise, you know, just historically, but like it never really truly had any sort of story basis, and I think they're finally going back and being like, yeah, we're still gonna make it this like fun, rompy, like gory, messy, awesome like gameplay, but we're also going to try to tie in some sort of significance with like where these things came from, why it's important that you destroy them, like who you even are, even though like you're still like kind of like a faceless uh butcher man.
Doom Slayer.
Yeah, like you know, I don't think it'll ever be like, you know, any kind of significance toward like the character, but I think they are trying to story build around like the environment and the enemies and things like that. Which the first one I think did decently well. I didn't even really follow it because I was like, I don't care, dude, just give me to the zombies or give me to the alien demons or whatever. You know, like it's just like that's mostly the draw for me because it's goddamn cathartic to be able to just smash in a bunch of enemies' faces. But I applaud their thinking though, just trying to make it more significant, especially in this age of like these blockbuster type of video games. I like that they're kind of trying to bring some significance to that. So, but that's mostly my big one this year, just because I played the original one and it was one of the few games I actually played all the way through, and I was like, oh man, just more of this, even if it wasn't anything different, just more of this would be fantastic. Because I am totally down for some more of Doom. So yeah, so that was kind of like our top ones last week, and let me see if I can bring up my list here, because I tried to write down some of the maybe lesser known ones that we didn't get to discuss last week because we got a little cut off. Um, I would say a lot of these on this list are TBA, and we don't even really know if they're going to be this year, so some of these take them with a grain of salt because I couldn't find a lot of dates for a lot of them, and I'm sure that the companies themselves will probably end up pushing them back. But for the most part, these are all games that are supposed to come out this year. So we'll just kind of briefly like go over them. And if there's any that you guys can think of too that aren't like on my list, I just kind of very briefly put together a list. But even if it's one that we might have discussed last week, feel free to bring it up as well. The first one I will bring up technically already came out this year, but it's in early access, and I'm hoping that the official releases this year is Temtem, which if you've seen my Twitter feed, you've probably
You've been going
seen.
insane over Temtem.
You've probably seen a lot of retweets and shit about it and likes and stuff, but I mean, I'm not like obsessed with it because it really is just like kind of another like Pokemon to me, and I already have the original like Pokemon Sword going on right now, so I'm like literally bouncing between both. I'm like Pokemon'd out right now. It's kind of weird because that's not really like my typical genre, but the early access came out I think like a week ago, and since then they've had a lot of issues with server capacity and trying to get a lot of hotfixes out. For the most part, what I could play was pretty stable. I think the biggest issue is that this is an indie studio trying to get servers ready for an international PC audience, which is going to be huge, and so they just weren't prepared. But it's gotten a lot better now. I've been able to actually hop on and like play a lot of it. And I say that this is a anticipated release for me just because it was anticipated before it like came out, but now that I've played it, I'm like, dude, you need to like give me more of this. Like you not more of the game itself, because I'm not anywhere near like having beaten it, but a lot of the features are not available, or there's like content that's not available yet. And I don't think they've actually given a date, but I could see this potentially coming out fully this year, since there's stuff that I know that they're still like working on, but it's mostly like completed. I think this was a lot of them just trying to get it out and get it in people's hands, but I could see this being like a really big thing if they released more of what they've promised. I think they've got like a list of like what all they want to release still, but there's like buildings that are there that says like, oh, future content and stuff like that. There's like a like a guild clan sort of system that you're gonna be able to like, you know, bring your friends in and like do group stuff together, things like that, where I'm just kind of like, oh man, that would have been nice having that now. I keep running past, like, I've run past maybe 2 buildings now that have said, like, oh, we're closed because we're, you know, future content, whatever. And I'm like, man, like, why is this here then? So that's probably why I put it on this list, just because, like, it feels like almost like a demo of a original concept that I'm excited to see more of. And I know you guys may not have any opinions on it, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
I remember I've found a lot of games here which haven't been announced for 2020, but we know they exist, and they're coming at some point, hopefully. I'm surprised. Oh my gosh, there's so many games that I forgot were coming out.
Yeah, right? Oh, I know.
There's the new Hollow Knight.
Yes, I have that on my list as well, and I thought that we had a date for it, but I kept finding TBA, so I'm like, okay, I guess it's just this year at some point. I feel like we've been hearing about it for a while. And I think it's just gonna be like another like leg of the Hollow Knight quote unquote story. Again, that was another one of those games that didn't really have like a story, but it just kind of had like a common thread that you followed along. So any more of that, and I think people will be super excited about it. I mean, Nate and I beat that game together, and it was like, oh man, it's probably one of the best indie games I have ever played. I'm not like obsessed with it like some people can be, but I'm looking forward to it. I'll probably end up picking it up once it comes out.
Yeah, there's like, I remember like a couple of Bayonetta 3 is announced. It's coming eventually to Switch.
Who knows if it's gonna be this year though? They haven't said anything.
They have said nothing. There's Hellblade Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2.
Which, I mean, I think they announced that late last year, like in December. So I'm kind of thinking probably not this year, but it'd be nice. I never played the first one. I know it's on like Game Pass and everyone's like, play it! And I'm like, when do I have time? But it looked freaking cool. So more of that, I'm like, hell yeah. And I think I can't remember who the developer was, but I don't think they were like super well known. So it was kind of like a big deal for them.
Yeah, it's like a very good indie game.
Right, exactly.
But if you like Dark Souls games, we got Ghost of Tsushima, but there's another one.
There's
There's
two that are very
there's
similar.
Elden Ring,
Yes.
which is made from Software, and George R. R. Martin, the man who made Game of Thrones.
I am so fucking in for this. I don't know. Literally have said nothing about it other than the fact that it's supposed to be Dark
The trailer
Soulsy.
was cool.
It's supposed to be. It's got George R. R. Martin. It's supposed to be kind of like I think a little like open worldy or whatever. I think it was what they say like Norse mythology or something like that. Seems like everyone's leaning toward
Yeah.
more Norse mythology all of a sudden, which is kind of weird. That's the thing, right? It's the hotness right now. But oh man, I am like totally in. I'm not like a big Dark Souls person, but I respect the people who like play those games. But lately, Sekiro was amazing. Still haven't gotten through all of that with Nate yet, but he has to side note, he has to play all of those games because I'm awful at them, but I like to watch from the sidelines and I enjoy what I see. Bloodborne was really good as well. So more of that plus like the Martin style of writing and whatnot, like because those Dark Souls games never had like a story. Sekiro even didn't really have like a story. It was just kind of like gotta get yo little bro back, it's just like that's it. That's pretty much just like damsel in distress, but you're gonna fight all these different monsters and stuff. The other Dark Souls, I couldn't even tell you what the plot was, if there was one at all. But this one, I think, is definitely gonna have more of a story thread, which makes me excited about it.
There's a new game coming out in just 2 days, which is Zombie Army 4 Dead War.
I have never heard of that, and there's four of them.
I'm look- I'm looking forward to that one.
Oh, all right. What is this? Tell us about it.
Basically, so you've got you got the Sniper Elite games, which 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they're very popular, etc. But they had a zombie spin-off like Call of Duty, which was a Zombie Army. And the first three games they've been released like so many times over the years. They kind of like been in that like sort of like that Kingdom Hearts cycle of being remade and remastered and bundled together with DLC, etc., etc. Almost like Payday 2 as well. But now finally, after a couple, well, after like I know it's like something like 5 years since like number 3, they've now made the fourth one, and it's basically imagine Left 4 Dead but with Sniper Elite controls and bullet time. It's just crazy. There's a zombie shark in it.
Because why not?
It's my type of game, and
Awesome.
I want to get it so bad.
That's cool. Yeah, I've never
It's
heard of
a
that
smaller
before.
title. It's probably quite cheaper compared to some of the releases.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. One that reminds me of that is Rainbow Six Quarantine. It's supposed to be coming out this year, and that's supposed to be kind of like it's like Rainbow Six, but you're not fighting people, you're fighting zombies. It's kind of like a co-op adventure sort of thing. I don't know a whole lot about that. I just kind of sort of stumbled upon it when I was looking up stuff. But again, like the zombie theme is alive and well. Apparently, like I kind of thought that people were getting tired of it, but every year there seems to be like more and more zombie games coming out. So I'm like, hey, okay, you go zombos. But that one seems kind of interesting because y'all know I am awful at Rainbow Six, just terrible. I don't know why, but that game just does not speak to me for some reason. But being able to like just play co-op with friends against like zombies and stuff and going around and doing like story mission type stuff, that I think speaks to me a little bit more. And I appreciate the co-op leaning for a lot of these games that I looked up as well. Like a lot of them are like having the opportunity to play with friends. I'm like, heck yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm happy to have like the solo adventure story games as well. But whenever I can open up something to having co-op, I'm about that.
There's only sort of there's so many games, and so many of them haven't actually got release dates yet. It's just maybe 2020. Like there's a Watch Dogs Legion, hopefully 2020.
Yeah, that one I thought for sure had a solid release date, and then they pushed it, I think, because it was supposed
it
to be
was
like
yeah,
April
it
or something.
was meant to be March,
March?
and then they pushed it back indefinitely.
Yeah, which I'm like, what the hell? Like,
But
what is it
like
about this game that's taking them so long? They've made two prior to this. I can't imagine the
the
mechanics would be that crazy.
one of the big
Hey,
reasons
Blaze.
it's taken them ages Ubisoft to put out anything new is because 2019 was a terrible year for them money wise. Because Breakpoint essentially lost them everything.
Ooh, wow,
Even though
yeah.
Breakpoint is an amazing game and I stand by it.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Breakpoint failed from like the marketing. I don't feel like I really saw
Yeah.
anything about it. I'm like a big FPS person. I feel like it just kind of got washed away by the Call of Duties of the world, you know what I mean? Like it just
Yeah.
didn't stand out to me,
I
so
I enjoyed it. I like shooting big robots with little guns, you know. And then I've got one game which I think if I could just give me a minute.
yeah, no, but like Watch Dogs Legion, I played the first one because he gave me it for free with my graphics card, and I was like, this is okay, I guess. I was kind of like whatever about it. I didn't bother to play the second one, even though I think it was basically the same idea but better. But Legion, the only reason why I would say that might interest me is because it's less so about the main character and more about recruiting random people on the street to your cause and having them do like weird and wacky things. I think it opens it up to a lot more like interesting and hilarious like gameplay, which I'm kind of about because, you know, like the trailer of it showed like a grandma going around like hacking people and stuff. It's like things like that is just gonna, I think, give it a whole new perspective because before I think people are just kind of uninterested about a single player like hacker dude running around doing whatever. I think this one's gonna feel a lot more like open world and inclusive and stuff like that. Like anyone could be a hacker and you can get in all kinds of shenanigans and stuff like that. So that one I might keep my eye on. I'm still not excited about it because Watch Dogs never really excited me before. The idea of it was interesting. It's like GTA, but like you hack everything and make it bend to your will, basically. But it was always kind of just there. It was never anything super exciting.
I've got one here for all the dating simulator fans out there. I'm gonna pitch this one to you because I think it'll make everyone smile and laugh. So, I assume you've played a dungeon crawling game before. You've killed monsters in games and gotten loot.
Yes, I
And
have.
sometimes you get your favorite sword, and you sometimes you even name your sword. I personally like to go with a ball smasher, stuff like that, silly stuff. But imagine a dungeon crawling game where the weapons that you found in the dungeon weren't just weapons. They somehow magically transformed into single women who you could then take onto a dating simulator game.
Oh no, I think I know what you're talking about.
Introduced in Boyfriend Dungeon.
Ugh.
You've never heard of. And it's on Switch and PC. And I want it now because the pitch is so insane that I love it.
Good lord.
It's brilliant. It's the perfect game. My pitch sounds insane, but that's the pitch they use for the game itself.
Yeah, pretty much. Now, is this announced or is this already out?
It's sometime in 2020.
Okay, I think I
Not
saw
out yet.
something about it, but I thought maybe that was like the release trailer or something. I don't remember what I saw about it, but someone brought it up somewhere, and I was like, "Oh God, no! This is like so not what I'm into." Mostly because like dungeon crawling and stuff is like fine or whatever, but like I don't know, things where they're like I don't know, anything with boyfriend in the name is probably gonna turn me off. But I could definitely see it being hilarious. As long as they kind of know that they're hilarious, like they know that this is a complete joke, then I'm for it. If they're being like, you know, I don't know, like creepy about it or being like, I don't know, like I'm using women or whatever, like that kind of stuff. I'm like, okay, get the hell out of here. But I think it'll be hilarious. I think they know that the what they're making is kind of like a what do I want to say, like a caricature, like uh what do I want to say, like a joke, but not really a joke, like a parody. God damn it, I don't know why that took me so long. A parody of like what already exists for like dungeon crawlers or whatever. Then I could see it.
There's, there's a few games which I've noticed something's returned to the popularity of game developers, mostly indie developers, but messing with time is something that indie loves. Messing with time to make puzzles. I got two games here that mess with time for puzzly action games. There's one called 12 Minutes, which is essentially imagine. So the premise is you relive the same 12 minutes over and over again, but
Oh, okay, I've seen this. Yeah.
but basically what it starts is you are a lovely husband and you're chilling with your wife in your living room, and suddenly a police officer breaks down your front door, accuses her of murder, and you go back in time. And basically it's like an investigation game. Probably gets a bit. It sounds like it's gonna get horror really quickly,
Mm,
and that's cool. And I think it's indie, and
I
uh,
believe so. Yeah.
anything with time, indie, and murder always comes out good. And then um there's another indie time loopy game called Deathloop, which, as far as I can tell, it's two assassins killing each other over and over again in a loop. I
What else do you
prob-
need to know?
it's fun. It's fun shooty time. So that's what we as gamers love. We don't care about actual story, you
Shooty
know.
times. I mean, yeah, like that. I think that's really like one of my things is like I appreciate a good story, but at the same time, like I don't usually go out of my way to find like the story based games or whatever. I usually try to find games that are like replayable because I like to get them. I like to get the most out of my money. Because sometimes I feel like when you play like a story game, for instance, you play it once and then you're done, and unless it took me like 60 hours to get through that story, I never feel like it was like truly well spent money for like a $60 game. That's my own personal bias, but I appreciate games that can kind of like keep me in the game past 60 hours even and allow me to just run around in that world and kind of do different things every time, but like still the same thing is totally fine with me. Like obviously, multiplayer games like Call of Duty and whatnot, you're technically playing the same thing over and over, but typically you get better at it or whatever. Certain games that do like randomized dungeons and whatnot, that kind of shit I totally get into because it's a different space every time, even though you're basically doing the same thing. There was a game I came across today actually that looked really interesting, and it's coming out in 4 days. It's called Scourgebringer, and they described it as Dead Cells meets Celeste, which I'm really bad at Dead Cells, but I appreciated what it did. Mixed with Celeste, which was one of my favorite games when it came out that year. So that those two things, plus the fact that like it's got like a really cool pixel style, and I think they said that it was kind of like a randomized dungeon sort of gameplay. I am like, oh my god, I'm like salivating at the thought of this. So the fact that it comes out in like 4 days, I'm like, holy shit, where's this been all my life? So I'm totally happy to like give some light to these indie games that are coming out this year, because I feel like everyone always talks about the big blockbusters, but no one ever really goes back to like these really little ones that are going to be coming out. They usually don't get talked about until they've come out and a bunch of bigger people have played them and then talked about them, and then it kind of trickles down to everybody else. So I'm super happy to be able to kind of shed light on those, because some people may not know about it. Maybe from this podcast they may check it out, but I definitely recommend people check out that one in particular as well if you do like that sort of Celeste, Dead Cells, pixelized dungeon crawling sort of mechanic. That one really interested me. It looks beautiful.
That sounds like a type of game I'd really enjoy.
Yeah, right? Like it was on Steam for sure. I don't know if there's any other platforms, but yeah, definitely check it out cuz it's just again like no name developers, but it looks beautiful. I kind of want to wait maybe until it releases to see if anyone has gotten any reviews on it. Cuz for all I know it could be hot garbage, but it looks freaking fantastic right now. So Dead Cells, speaking of, does have DLC coming out this year as well, February 11th, so that's also coming up pretty soon. I think it's just more Dead Cells for the people who like Dead Cells, which is a really good game. If anyone is about sort of dungeon crawling, but then when you die, you have to kind of start over, but then you keep getting more and more skills to go through the dungeon and get better and better. Really good game. I highly recommend it for people who like that sort of thing. Tom, I didn't know if there was any others you wanted to bring up while we just kind of keep rambling over here about other random stuff.
Yeah, actually, something that I'm kind of looking forward to on my list. It's like half game console, half games. It's the what was it, TurboGrafx 16 Mini or PC Engine for European people and stuff. Yeah, because I never had that system growing up, so that's like something totally new and a bunch of new games that I never touched, or at least new to me.
It's a turbo whatty whatty. I want to look this up.
It was PC Engine, I think in Japan too, but at least in Europe. But in the US, it was called the Turbo Graphics GRFX 16. And the mini console that they're putting out is going to have 50 games on it, 26 from Japan, and then 24 from the United States.
Oh, okay.
Which in a way is kind of a waste because some of them are duplicates. You'll have both the US and the Japanese version.
Oh, so maybe like you'll get like the languages and whatnot, like the
Yeah,
differences or
and
whatever.
that's like yeah, like the Japanese games are not going to be translated. So if you don't speak or read Japanese, you're not going to be able to know what's being said there and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a little different from the mini consoles that have been put out. Instead of having different games based on region, they're only having like the outer shell is going to look different. There's going to be like a Japan version, a European version, the US version, and then I think there was at least a fourth one. But all of the games are going to be identical among the versions, so you'll get the same 50 games.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I've never heard of this console before. It's definitely niche.
It was, I think, in the late 80s to the early 90s. It wasn't necessarily like that big.
Hmm. I mean, I love that they're going back and sort of bringing back these older consoles and making them, like giving them new hardware and whatnot, but allowing you to be able to play those games like the way that they were meant to be played, as opposed to just like porting them to like PC or something like that. I think that's really cool, especially for people who like to collect that sort of thing. They look awesome, like being able to have a shelf full of like quote unquote older consoles, but like in a newer shell, like they're not all dusty and old and whatnot. Like they actually look nice and whatnot. So that's really cool. And plus, obviously they'll have like, I'm assuming newer connections to like HDMI and things like that.
Yeah, HDMI, and don't know if it's probably 720p because all the mini consoles have been 720.
Mm-hmm.
But with older games like that were meant for 480p, you're not going to get much of a difference between 720 and 10.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I always looked at those mini consoles though as like a way like to try out these games. That like, hey, I really like this, and then it might be one that I buy a physical version of. But
Yeah.
I probably since I don't have any kind of like actual console to play this on, I don't think I'd ever get any of these games individually. But still, yeah, it's like it'd just be access to games that I never played before and like a console I never had. So even
Right.
though it's like 30 something plus years old, it's new to me. So
Yeah, and I especially like those ones where if you do happen to have the older cartridges and whatnot, that they still work with it. I always think that's really cool too, because it's almost like a recycling effort to be able to just like take all these older cartridges that you could find from, like used game stores and things like that, and kind of dig up like a little bit of history and be able to use it with like a newer hardware that connects with like your current day TVs and whatnot.
Yeah, like the analog quad consoles.
Yeah, like I think that's super cool. Like the one I think you brought up not too long ago was the Game Boy that they're trying to make. It's
Oh yeah,
obviously
the
like a
analog
knockoff
copy.
Game
Yeah,
Boy, but it like uses the
still hasn't had its
cartridges.
pre-order yet, so hopefully that'll be.
Yeah, I wonder when that's gonna come out because I feel like I heard about it a lot last year, just randomly on
I would
Twitter.
assume that the pre-orders would have been happening by now because like the last couple of years, their consoles have been coming out around like the March April time period. So I figured they would have already been doing it now, and I've seen people even like on like Facebook and stuff asking like, "Hey, when are the pre-orders going to go?" Because they mentioned this thing back in the summer, like when they first unveiled it.
Yeah, like yeah, I feel like I've been hearing about it for a while, but it was also kind of like a sort of like a Kickstarter sort of thing where I think people are just trying to get it like, out there. So yeah, like that sort of thing I think is really cool. I wish I had almost like kept all of my old Game Boy cartridges and stuff like that because they have since been like sold and lost and whatever else. But for the people
Oh
who
yeah, I wish I
collect
still
those
had my
things,
NES one.
yeah, like for people who collect those things and keep those things like in their closets and whatnot, being able to bring all that stuff back out and like that's super cool to me. It's also cool when kind of like the ones you were posting in the Discord where they're actually remaking the older cartridges. Like that's also really cool to me. I know it's not quite like recycling, but it still brings that kind of nostalgia back for those games that maybe you can't find nowadays, or at least in good condition. They're remaking them in the original hardware. That's super cool to me as well. Like
Yeah,
I,
there's tons of people out there that are actively trying to do game preservation because
mhm.
the older it gets, the consoles and like these game cartridges and stuff, they're not going to last forever.
Yeah, totally. And I
That's
think
one of the
it's
arguments for emulation is that
yeah,
you don't
true.
want these things lost in time forever. Let them survive. It's
Yeah, totally. Cause yeah, once you lose those games, like if you don't have the original like ROM or whatever. I don't know what you call those things. I'm not very smart, but the originally like game code or whatever. As soon as those are lost and you can't find any like working cartridges anymore, then that game's just like gone. It's like it is important to kind of keep that alive in however you can. And I'm a proponent of emulation. At least I think it should be something that like is paid, but someone should be able to give you access to those like older games, even ones that are not super old, like ones from PlayStation and Xbox and things like that. The fact that they're kind of bringing those back, whether like I know Xbox, I think in particular, is having like a focus on bringing back some of those older titles and putting them in like their store or like a Game Pass situation or whatever. I think that's super important because not only does it introduce younger audiences to those older titles, which may be like classics or whatever. But at the same time, it does kind of preserve what used to be that you can't really find anymore. So yeah, I think that's super
yeah, like
cool.
being Super Bowl Sunday here. Like how many football fans would love to go back and see the first Super Bowl, but no film footage of that survived. They trash that stuff because they're like, oh, nobody's going to care about this in the future.
Yeah,
So it's
right.
like the same thing with games that it's you may look at it like, oh, well, this is Super Mario Brothers one. Who's going to want to play this? You're going to have somebody who's going to want to play it, check it out, and be like, hey, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, totally. And I love that Nintendo kind of like made an entire system around the online, but like allowing you to also be able to access that stuff with the online because I know a lot of people are getting online for things like Pokemon and stuff like that, but at the same time you do have the access to some of their older titles that they were able to emulate to bring to newer consoles, and I think that's super duper cool. And I always love to see what they end up adding because there are certain things that I'm like, oh, I hear about this all the time, but I never played it. So it's like you said, like it's new to me, even though it might not be like super old to somebody else. Like being able to play all of those like retro Marios and stuff. Mario was never a big part of my life, so it's kind of cool to see all these games come back and I can actually like get a hold of them. Legend of Zelda, things like that. Like I never played those older ones, so it's really cool. Um, so let's see. I'm trying to go through my list real quick. I'll just quickly bring up Persona 5 Royale. Bleh. That's supposed to come out in March 31st. I have heard so many good things about Persona 5, and this is supposed to come out on PS4 only, and I am pissed because I feel like this kind of game would be perfect and well suited toward the Switch. And as soon as they brought it toward the Switch, I probably would play it. But until then, I probably won't touch it. But I've heard it's really, really good. So for Persona fans, I'm not entirely sure what the difference is between the regular and the Royale version. I know people love the Persona 4 Golden, I think. Everyone talks about that as being like a really super good version of that game. So maybe this is just that but better. I don't know, but it's out there. Blame Sony. I always blame Sony for everything. As Chum says in the chat. Another indie game that I wanted to bring up is Carrion, which I think around the time that Game Awards came out, they had like a demo available. And I actually watched Ampu play it because I think I was like working at the time and I was just like, yeah, I'll just watch him like play a little bit of this. And it looks really cool. Again, a really cool pixel style. And it's just like this nasty looking monster running around like eating people for sustenance or whatever. So that sounded kind of interesting to me. And I'm honestly just a sucker for like pixelized versions of things. So I thought that was really cool looking. Oh, thank you for the link also, Tom. I can actually post this in the chat if anyone is curious about the TurboGrafx 16 Mini.
Yeah, I figured I'd throw that in there because you were asking about like it just by the name and stuff. You didn't know what it looked like.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the U.S. version. Yeah, so like I said, be the same games. They just have different shells based on the region. I guess based on how the console looked for that particular.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah, that's super cool. Let's see. As for other DLC, Cuphead DLC coming out this year, I never finished that, but really awesome, amazing game. I think it's indie, but it's also kind of funded by Microsoft, so like kind of not indie in that way, but super super good game. All of the art was hand-drawn and then scanned into the game and made animated kind of like old school cartoons. So
yeah, Cuphead looked amazing. Yeah,
yes,
they really nailed that old school animated look.
Right, exactly. And it kind of gives you that like feeling of like old school, like, you know, the Mickey cartoons and things like that.
When it got added to the Switch, it was on my list of things like I wanted to check out, but I haven't got it yet.
Yeah. I think they haven't added it to Game Pass yet, which really pisses me off because I think this would be perfect for that. It just would give them even more audience. At least I don't think it has. I could be wrong with that, but I think that was my main complaint was that they never brought it to Game Pass. But I think the Switch version of it I think is perfect because it is one of those games you could just kind of pick up and the controls are obviously like more controller based than something you'd want to play on like a mouse and keyboard. So definitely check that out if you can on like some sort of, I don't know, Xbox Game Pass or whatever else. But they are going to come out with DLC, and I'm assuming it's just going to be even more of the same. There isn't really like a storyline other than the main characters trying to beat the devil because they, you know, did whatever. So I'm assuming it's just going to be more of like more levels, more bosses, things like that. Hello, Ampu.
Yeah, I saw like a playthrough of most of the game and like just how incredibly tough it was.
Oh yeah, it's like it reminds me kind of like, you know, a Dark Soulsian version of like a platforming sort of game where it's very much like boss based, and then the levels that are not boss based are more of that sort of platformy feel. But damn, it's hard. It's so difficult.
Yeah, massive swarms of enemies and.
Yes, yeah, and just like it kind of like a bullet hell where you just got a lot going on the screen that you have to keep track of, and sort of like a timing mechanic that you can sort of like jump on top of things like bullets and stuff that you can kind of get away from, but it also charges you up. Another great game to play with co-op.
It seems mostly like down to like learning a pattern, and once you have the pattern, you can get through.
Right, yeah, and again, like co-op games, I always love that there's an option for co-op as well. So another really good co-op game as well. So that's coming out. I will briefly bring up. I want to say I think, let me check real quick. Um, I want to say that the Pokemon Sword and Shield DLC is coming out this year. I think, if I'm not mistaken, and if anyone knows, let me know before I can find it on here, because of course they're not gonna.
Pretty
Okay, there
sure
we
it
go.
is.
Yeah, I think it is too. Okay,
With the
so
game coming
the
out of last year, I would hope that they'd have a first DLC this year. Otherwise, that's a long.
right, yeah, I was trying to think like I was pretty sure there was like at least half of it, but both of them do come out this year, thank God. So, Isle of Armor in June, Crown Tundra in fall. I did want to bring that up as like an anticipated thing for me because a lot of people were kind of pissed that they weren't doing their typical like re-release of a game in like an ultra version or whatever naming scheme they usually bring it up in, where it just has like new content, new Pokemon and whatever else. This time around, instead of doing that, they're just giving you an option for a DLC pack. And I think you, if you just get the expansion pass, you get both parts and they come out in different times or whatever. I don't remember exactly how much. I want to say it was like $30 or somewhere around there, just to be able to get more story, more areas to run around in, more Pokemon, some of which you kind of already like recognize, but possibly some newer ones. They're bringing back the mythical birds or whatever, that sort of thing. So I'm really excited about it because the biggest thing for me is that when you have to buy an entirely new game, hence like, you know, the Ultra Sun and Moon versus just Sun and Moon, if you already had Sun and Moon and you had to buy a whole nother one, like you don't have like a save that goes between those. You're completely starting over in the Ultra version. Whereas in this, it's an expansion pass like you typically see in any other game, but you keep what progress you'd already made and the Pokemon you already have, and you just basically hop on the train and go to the new area, and that's pretty much it. Which I really kind of I think is a better method. I think it's a more modern method of doing it because having like an entirely like revamped version of a game that like just feels like it just came out, I think is silly in my opinion. I never got one of those like ultra versions or whatever of those games. Now, when they remake one, sort of like the Let's Play series that they made, or I think they made like the remakes to Ruby and Sapphire or whatever, that's kind of a different story for me because that's more of like that was an old game and we're bringing it back and revamping it. But whenever they have like a new game and then they just like slap a word on it and say like it's another brand new version, it always kind of felt greedy to me because it's another $60 you're gonna have to drop for what is essentially the same game. So it's kind of just like being able to use my current save, my current Pokemon, and then maybe tacking on like half that cost, like $30 or so, I think is awesome. I am totally down for it. I know that people kind of get bogged down in the way things used to be or whatever, but I think that's a really good move for Pokemon considering they seem to have the same formula every single time with their games. So doing anything different is a good thing in my opinion. It's a move toward the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. Like, the thing that was kind of off-putting for me for Pokemon is that, like, at least this generation, I've put over like 150 hours into my Pokemon game. If they came out with another version, like, you know, Pokemon Sword Ultimate or whatever, you know, Shield Ultimate, I had to start from the beginning and do that all over again just to get to the end game, which is like, oh, new stuff kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So even if they do release like the new stuff back in the past, people are kind of angry about that. Oh, I have to pay like an extra $30 or whatever. You're more or less, you know, just paying for $30 for the end game. Because if you buy an original one that was just
Right.
sort of like an extra, you know, standalone release with extra stuff at the end, it's more or less the same price as the original. So you paid like half for the original content and half for the extended content as well.
Right. And yeah, and you bring up a good point too, is like this content is really meant to be like an end game thing. I don't even know if you can access it halfway through the game. Maybe you can. I don't know if they went over it, but for the most part, you're probably going to want to be end game so then you can go into the new worlds with like, you know, high level Pokemon and stuff like that and be able to capture all these newer Pokemon that are in there. I think they're gonna introduce like a new sort of like wild area and things like that.
Hmm.
Which I'm like, oh my god, like I love the wild area, so I'm like, more wild area, yay! And just being able to like see more of the world, I'm super excited to see that because like typically in Pokemon games, like you get some differences in like the areas, but like this is gonna feel like an entirely new section. It kind of reminds me of like what Monster Hunter is doing right now with World, where they've got the main sort of island or whatever, but then the expansion takes you to like a different section with a completely different look to it and different monsters and stuff. So and even like the Pokemon themselves are supposed to look different in these different areas. So it's kind of like a, you know, collect all the different looks and stuff like that. Like I'm really excited about it. So that's another one of my most anticipated, especially cuz now I'm actually like trying to beat this newer Pokemon game with Pokemon Sword. Like this is one of the few that I've actually felt like I wanted to beat, and I've really enjoyed it so far. So giving me more of that is always going to be a good thing, in my opinion. Especially since like they're also introducing the whole Pokemon Home aspect as well, which kind of coincides with the DLC in that it's kind of like a bank for all of your Pokemon that you've collected over different games and over this newer release. So yeah, I think they're making good moves. I kind of dig it.
Yeah, like overall, like adding new Pokemon is great, and even like the Slowpoke that you could get now, it's an original 151 Pokemon, but they changed it up for Galarian form. And like even though it might not have a Pokédex entry, you're still collecting it. You could still evolve it. Like you get Charmander, I think. No, not Charmander. You could get like Bulbasaur and Squirtle, I think, and all of that.
Plus,
What you
they're kind of like re-releasing like I think like it was like the mythical birds and like other like older Pokemon that people like recognize and stuff. So it's just like it's for collectors, like for people who want to collect them all. Like it's just like even more like awesome Pokemon to collect. I'm super excited about that because I never I think I only saw those like mythical birds like in like the movie or whatever. Like I never actually was able to, battle them, collect them, catch them, whatever. So yeah, I'm stoked, dude. This Pokemon Sword and Shield, it just feels bigger than what the other ones always felt like to me. With like the way that you just kind of can run around in this like open world and stuff, and it feels a lot more like I don't know, more open world than I feel like they have before. And introducing more areas, I think, is gonna make it feel even bigger. So, plus the fact that you've got the multiplayer component with the raids and whatnot. So I'm all in on it, man. Like this has been probably the best Pokemon that I've played since like back in the Ruby days, at least from my perspective. So more Pokemon, I'm like, yeah, give it to me, man.
Yeah, and I think like the big thing about it is this is the first Pokemon that's on a console, like not a handheld, like an actual console that hooks up to the TV.
Hmm.
So overall, even if it's the same kind of formula, it feels different.
Yeah, totally.
It feels like I could sit down here and play it a lot longer than I can on the 3DS or something because I have to put that up to my I have to hold it really close. I have to kind of strain my eyes, bifocals and all that, and like it's a hassle. So like it's cool that you could stick it on the TV, you could sit on the couch, with your Switch Pro controller and just like go at it, for
Yeah.
hours on end without eye strain or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that this is kind of a step toward like a more console based Pokemon game, like a real full-fledged like, awesome graphics, and then maybe even further going into like an MMO perspective with what we've seen from like the wild areas. If they could just like take that sort of concept and expand it toward like the entire world, like this kind of feels like like them dipping their toes into that sort of gameplay mindset. And with the launch of Temtem, like I kind of talked about earlier, obviously people want that from them. They want a sort of like big open world MMO sort of feel for Pokemon. I think again, like this is a good step in that direction. I just hope that they keep moving towards something new and different because they're making really good moves right now. But they gotta notice like what what people are really looking for, what people really like about it. And for me, it's all those like social aspects and the big open worlds and things like that. So more of that is great, and I hope that they keep pushing toward that direction. But keep going, like like I can't wait to hear the next Pokemon game. I hope it's something that's even grander than that. If they can make something that rivals something like Temtem, it's like Temtem's never going to be Pokemon, but what they're doing is like nothing like what Pokemon has been doing. So it kind of feels that need for people who are fans but still kind of want that more social aspect, running around in like a world with other real people is really cool. So yeah. Chum brought up in the chat Final Fantasy VII. I think we kind of brought it up last episode, but since a lot of us here weren't really like Final Fantasy people, we didn't really know what to like talk about with it.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, if you could speak to like, what like why it's a big deal, what you're kind of looking forward to it, like are you going to get it as like a Final Fantasy fan?
Oh yeah, like I think it's just a big deal overall is because, 6 was on the Super Nintendo. It was 2D flat, pixelated like 16-bit whatever the SNES was. The Final Fantasy VII was the first 3D Final Fantasy game. Like that's kind of like a big deal in itself. So, like I played it. It had a good storyline. It was very, I want to say emo, but very like edgelordy, I guess, like back in the time. But it's a good story overall. Like it's one that I've always remembered. Like even I've played like 8, 9, 10, all that. Like I always go back to 7 thinking about that story. So that they're remaking it, ground up like it's a new game is amazing. They're adding more content to it to kind of flesh it out a bit. Instead of like, going from one area to another, like they might add some extra stories like, oh, this is what happened here when you were over here, like that kind of thing.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's kind of like expanding on the original story to make it more fuller. That's what they're going to do parts. Like, I'm not sure how many parts they're going to do, but like the one that's coming out in April is part 1.
Oh,
And,
okay.
Yeah, so they're going to do like episodic, like an adventure or whatnot. So
Is
they're
it
good,
still,
they're doing that.
you can still buy like the full game and then you just get them as episodes, kind of like a Life is Strange situation? Or is
Maybe.
it by episode?
I think it might be by episode, but it's not
Really?
like a half game per episode. I think it's going to be like a full game per episode. You're going to get like Final Fantasy kind of like 13, 13-2, or 10-2, kind of thing. So it's going
Wow.
to be like that,
Okay.
But they're really doing a lot on it. The characters look great that I've seen.
It does look really good. Like I don't know anything about anything Final Fantasy, but just looking at the trailers, I'm like, that looks pretty good.
Yeah, but like, the theme song trailer came out earlier this week, which showed a lot more. It showed characters like Red 13 that we haven't seen yet, and then he looked really good. It kind of showed different parts of the story and whatnot, because they can't spoil anything that you've already seen. So, it's like a 20-year-old game or whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it looks good. They're even adding, well, they're keeping in the things that might be controversial. And nowadays, like when Cloud cross dresses and goes to like this guy who's trying to marry promiscuous women. I was gonna say something else. Promiscuous women, And yeah, they're just kind of keeping to the story of the original while expanding upon it. So it's like you're having the same story with more storytelling to it.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that they were adding like extra story content and stuff like that too. That's got to be really exciting for like fans who, really love that game but like want more of that game. So it kind of feels more like an actual release as opposed to a re-release kind of thing.
Yeah. Like, it's not just let's re-up Final Fantasy VIII, like the remaster of Final Fantasy VIII, just like throw it out there, because that was like the same
Yeah.
game. This is more or less, they have the base and they're kind of expanding upon it.
Yeah, that's really cool. Cause yeah, like things like Resident Evil, like they remade those, but I feel like that was for the most part like the same exact thing with like a new skin sort of situation. So yeah, that's pretty cool though. I what kind of like gameplay is Final Fantasy VII? Because I haven't really been able to like nail down like what it is really from basic, gameplay perspective.
More or less, you run and whatnot, and if you go into a battle, like a battle screen appears, you go into like the battle, screen, and then I don't know too much about the fighting. I know you could switch between times, like original, where you're kind of in a line, and you select like attack, skill, whatnot, and then you attack like on a turn-based kind of back and forth original JRPG thing.
Gotcha. Okay.
Or you could do like this free mode, which is kind of like Final Fantasy 13, with lightning and stuff. We kind of run around, attack, whatnot. So it's kind of like if you want to do the original, you could do like the original, time-based, turn-based system, or you could or you could do the newer one that you kind of run around, swap between characters, to do like certain skills at certain times and everything.
Oh, okay. So are they like allowing you to choose, or is that just based on the situation?
You could swap to the characters that you have in your party. So say you have Cloud, the blonde-haired guy, with Tifa, which is like the black-haired with like the big chest, and say Red 13, which is the dog. Like those three people are in your party, so if you're inside a battle with those three, you could swap between those three to control at any given time.
Okay. Oh, cool. Yeah. I've like I said, I've never been a Final Fantasy person, but I know a lot of people were like freaking out about this. So if at some point I find myself like, looking at it and being like, that looks cool, might pick it up just to kind of dip my toes into that Final Fantasy pool because more like a ocean, I think at this point. But but I appreciate that game studios are trying to bring that sort of thing back, like Resident Evil and all those, because people like me who definitely miss them, like in their childhood and whatnot, especially getting them with like a fresh coat of paint, not necessarily just like, oh yeah, here's like the old ass game that is gonna like burn your eyes trying to play it nowadays. Giving them sort of that fresh feel and even maybe fixing some of the things that people griped about before, I'm always a fan of. Like I said with Resident Evil 2 is the whole reason why I even picked that up, was because people just praised it as like being this awesome game, but I just never wanted to go back and play like the old version, or didn't even know how for the most part. So them re-releasing games like this to current day consoles is like super helpful, and I think it introduces even more of an audience who may never have played them before. So I'm totally down for that. Like, I don't know if I'll ever play it, but I appreciate when companies do that. I know a lot of people kind of gripe that like, oh, they don't make anything new, they're just rehashing old stuff, but sometimes the old stuff is what people want, but just like current day, like fixing some of the movement mechanics or whatever, but also like making it modern but keeping some of that original charm. I am all for that.
Not all the remasters go over well. I remember when they did the remastered Turtles in Time game, a lot of people complained about it, felt that it was inferior to the.
Let's not talk about remastered Warcraft 3.
Oh no. I know, right? Like I didn't know that was like coming out until all of a sudden it was here, and I was like, oh, because I don't feel like anyone ever really talked about it. I knew that it was coming, but did we have a date, or did that just shadow drop?
We had originally was kind of shown at BlizzCon 2018. It's gonna be sometime in 2019. It got delayed because Blizzard soon TM, and they kind of didn't talk about it for a while though. There was nothing at all. Then they kind of said like, oh, it's gonna be released in like the first quarter of 2020, and then it kind of dropped. I think they announced like, oh, it's gonna drop in 2 days or something, but that was about it, I think.
Oh yeah, because that felt like it came out of nowhere, and then on top of that, I was interested in it because remakes. I'm like, I hear about these games all the time, and this is a perfect time for me to hop into it when it's all brand new and fresh and shiny. And then as soon as I looked into it, all of a sudden it was like, skirt, nope, this is not at all what people were asking for. This is not looking great. It's got issues, blah, blah, blah. I was like, oof. So hopefully anyone here who was anticipating that game this year, I mean, I hope what you got was what you wanted, and if not, get that refund, bro. I heard a lot of people say it's Warcraft 3 refunded, which
They don't
was
even
really
refund it though.
it's too bad though. It's just like, damn, it's really too bad. I mean, at least is Warcraft the new expansion coming out this year?
Yeah, usually end of year ish or
Okay.
summer, like summer end of year is when they usually release new expansions.
Yeah, at least I think that's going to be pretty good from what we saw from the BlizzCon announcements and stuff last year. But yeah, it's really too bad that they kind of dropped the ball on that. A lot of people were saying it was because they outsourced it to an Asian company that like is like notorious for kind of like shitty sort of like microtransaction-y stuff and like not doing so hot with like the remakes and all that and like just not really giving it any sort of love that it deserves because I mean as soon as you take like a beloved franchise out of the original studio and into the hands of some outsider company, it's like you're not going to get that same sort of feeling out of it. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of it like they in like trailers and stuff it looked like they were supposed to be replacing some of the like cutscenes and things like that with like newer sort of like that World of Warcraft feel of like trailers, like the really cool production value of them. And
Hmm.
then when you got it, it ended up just being literally the same exact like frame for frame cutscene, but with like slightly better texture. Like literally, like I think someone I saw said that it looked like someone had just made like a pet project of reskinning the game to have better texture, but that was it. Literally everything else was the same. Plus the
Yeah,
fact that
definitely.
you could make custom maps, I think, and then Blizzard came out and said that every custom map you make is like theirs to use or something like that. Like just a lot of bad press about it lately.
You know why that is? Why they said anything they make in their game is theirs?
No.
Dota spawned from a Warcraft 3 mod.
Well then.
So, like the people who made Dota, like, oh, this is a cool game. We're gonna make it. Gonna take it from Warcraft 3 and make our own game from it. So they did, and then it was that, and then Valve bought them out, and so Valve has Dota did really well. Blizzard was like, well, we want to get on that, so they did Blizzard Dota, which Dota Valve didn't like. Blizzard changed the name to All Stars later on and changed the Heroes of the Storm. Didn't do too well, so I think they're kind of salty, maybe a bit
Maybe
that
you
like the
bit.
MOBA genre spawned from Warcraft 3, and they didn't have like the legality back then to be like, nope, it's ours kind of thing.
Yeah, but like at the same time, it's like how you gonna take ownership of that like concept? Like, I mean, it's one thing if they're taking like the straight up code from it, but yeah, I mean, obviously, Dota was very successful in what they were doing. There's been plenty since then that have spawned. So yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that them being kind of salty about that. But like on top of the fact that this is already getting bad publicity for being poopy, poopy port, it's like don't rub more salt into the wound by like coming out and being like, but all your stuff that you make is actually ours. It's like, dude, like back up. Like people are already complaining about this shit. Like you don't need to give them more to grumble about. So it's really too bad. It's again it's a launch this year that already kind of fell flat on its face. So let's hope that these other anticipated games don't also meet the same fate. Diablo 4 may or may not be coming out this year. We don't really know. Overwatch 2, we don't really know anything about, but I can only hope and dream that's coming out this year because they look
Yeah.
freaking fantastic. So those are kind of like on my list, but like again, kind of like bench warmers because who knows when they're going to come out. World of Warcraft, the expansion is coming out this year, so I have a feeling that those will probably wait till next year to kind of give them their own sort of light. Because guaranteed, I think it's gonna if they come out at all, it's gonna be more of a fall thing, and I
Mhm.
believe World of Warcraft is gonna come out around that time, so they're probably not gonna want that to overshadow, or even worse, have one of those overshadow World of Warcraft. So
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, so that's kind of like a long shot for me, but speaking of Blizzard, those are kind of like my anticipated games for this year. World of Warcraft is obviously like fantastic as an MMO, and the more expansions, the better, in my opinion, especially because this new one does look really cool. Don't know if I'll pick it up, but it does look really neat, and I'd say it's well anticipated since the last one because I don't think that Battle for Azeroth was like bad, but I don't think it was like necessarily like the best thing ever. So I'm sure
Yeah,
World of
it's a bit
Warcraft.
lackluster overall.
Yeah, I think World of Warcraft fans are just kind of like, waiting for some new blood, really, just kind of like instead of the same old same old. Because Battle for Azeroth just as a concept never felt very original to me because it's like I don't know, it's a battle against like the two forces. Like yeah, this has been happening for years now. I don't like it, nothing is really like new or changed. Whereas things like Legion had the new race or not race what's it called? Not race, but the
Artifacts, the weapons.
well yeah, it brought that in, but it was like you could be the demon hunter
Yeah, Demon Hunter class.
class. Yes, it had the new class, it had the new like areas or whatever. It brought back the like beloved character or whatever, like that sort of thing where it felt new, whereas this one kind of just felt like a rehashing of stuff that already kind of occurred. So I don't know, we'll see. I thought the new one looked really interesting with the new race. I think they have races, but I think that's like a end game thing where you kind
Yeah,
of can pick, like you beat the main story and then you get to pick. I don't think it was a thing that you could pick at the beginning. I could be wrong though. I kind of
yeah.
hope
Like
it's
usually,
I kind of hope it's a thing that you can pick at the beginning, like when you create like a new character or something. That'd be really cool if you could pick one of these newer like races or whatever, but I have a feeling it's going to be a similar process where you have to go through it first. Although didn't they say that it was like a thing where you picked a faction and then you just like fought in that faction, but then after that it like opens up to the other ones, so you don't have to like keep creating like new characters or something like that. I can't remember exactly what happened in that.
yeah, it's something like a catch-up system or something, whether for like like second, third tunes kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Like it wasn't hard to like level up, like to try out all of the factions because there was like four or something like that. But like it's always a pain to have to like get a whole new character and go through all of the same bullshit over and over again. Like they made it easier, I think, after the first character, which is really nice for people like me who aren't gonna freaking grind the same damn areas like over and over and over again. It's like that's really neat for me. So I think they're trying to find ways to bring in people like me who are more casual and who may have like missed a couple expansions or maybe like kind of off and on play, make it easier for us to really get into it and not feel like it's super duper grindy and whatnot. So that's awesome. It looks great, and I hope that it's more of what people want. ESO, speaking of MMOs, coming out with their Greymore DLC this year, June 2nd. That looks pretty cool. ESO's one of those that it's one of my favorite MMOs, even though I never have the time to play things like that. But this one, I think they said, was geared toward new players as well as old. Plus the fact that it is supposed to be set in Skyrim, but like 1,000 years before Skyrim takes place. So I think it's a lot of them kind of bringing you back to what you already kind of know and love, because obviously Skyrim is like beloved by many of people, especially considering they put it on every goddamn platform imaginable, including your smart toaster. So bringing people back to Skyrim, I think, is a smart move for them, because a lot of the DLC sort of like reference things you may have like known or something from the past games. Morrowind, for example, obviously referencing Elder Scrolls Morrowind. So bringing it back to Skyrim, I think is smart, and I think it's gonna be really cool looking. If they do sort of if it's not one of those things where like you have to level up your character all the way and then access that content, if it's something that new players can hop into, I'm really excited about it. I haven't really looked into it just because I fell off ESO a while back, but again, it's the same WoW problem where it's like you have to find ways to bring in people who either haven't played the other expansions or like kind of hopped in, hopped out, and are casual about it. You got to find ways to bring them back in a way that is like smooth and isn't going to be like, holy shit, there's a whole bunch of shit I got to learn and do and all that stuff. A bunch of grinding stuff that I don't really care about. I just want to hop into the new content kind of thing. So, that'll be kind of interesting. I'm going to keep my eye on that as well because obviously Skyrim, super duper cool. And that game just in itself, I love ESO. So if anyone is looking for like an MMO, I think, I can't remember exactly, but I want to say they opened that up to free to play for certain areas, and then you just kind of buy the expansions as you go. So definitely check that out as well. If you're looking for like another MMO this year to check out. Let's see. I'm trying to look down at my list to make sure that I covered everything. Is anyone here like a Halo person?
A little bit.
A little bit? Because I'm not really like I never was like an Xbox person except for 360, so I played like a little bit of Halo 3, but never really the campaign. So this new game coming out holiday 2020, don't really know exactly when, but it should be this year unless they push it back. Halo Infinite is coming out this year, and it's supposed to be, I think, possibly the end of Master Chief, maybe.
Maybe.
And I'm thinking it's going to be kind of like a wrap up of that entire, like of his kind of sort of saga or whatever. For the most part, from what I've seen, we haven't seen a lot, but it looks like more of the same. I don't know if anyone had any comments on that. It is, I think, using a different engine than before and supposed to look really beautiful. And it's supposed to be more story based because that seems to be the trend lately, is taking a thing that didn't used to be all that story driven and then like making it a lot more like story based, like God of War, for instance. So that might be interesting for people who are more into like the story of things. I don't know if it's, you might have to have played the Halos before to really understand what's going on, but
You might.
but I think it'll be really good looking. At least it's going to be, again, another one of those like sort of blockbuster games that just looks really beautiful and may not be something that like people who aren't into the Halo universe can just pick up, but I'm sure the fans who are out there are going to be like all over it. I think it'll be really good. I hope it lives up to the hype at least, because I think the last game people were kind of meh about, but if this is them sort of ending it out, I hope that they are able to end it out in a way that leaves everyone satisfied. So it's supposed to be
Definitely.
Microsoft's big thing this year. Back when I first heard about it, a lot of people were speculating about what it was going to be. A lot of people said it was going to be like more open worldy MMO-y type of thing. I don't think that's what it's going to end up being. It's sounding like it's going to be more of the single player focused story based game. So again, not really a thing that like I'm super into. They do have the Master Chief Collection. The first game is out in that collection. If you buy the collection, you get like all of them as they release. So if anyone is interested in picking up Halo and getting into it before Halo Infinite comes out, I don't know if they'll probably have at least one more game in that line released, and then everything past that you may have to get through some other means than the collection, but you can at least play the first one in the series now, and it looks pretty good, and I've heard pretty good things about it. Nothing groundbreaking, because obviously it's just a remake of what was there before, so, but if you're interested, that's one of those things. Was there anything, Ampu, that you wanted to bring up in terms of most anticipated games this year?
Oh, because like one of the things I'm looking forward to is Animal Crossing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I played that on the GameCube. It was great. Like, it originally came out for the N64 in Japan, but like they had like the disk drive or something. I don't know, it was something. So it didn't come out for the 64 in the US, Europe kind of thing. So when it came out on the GameCube, it was kind of like behind like graphics wise at the time,
Mhm.
but it was a great game. And then after that, it went to handhelds, which I don't really play handhelds, so I missed out on
Right.
like all those ones. So it's kind of nice that it's coming back to a home console again. I could
Yeah.
play it. Plus, there's like a 2-player co-op mode, like couch co-op mode, which is
Ooh,
great.
nice.
So like if I'm on there, my son can hop on with me or whatever, and like come join me, walk around the island, I think it is, and collect acorns or build a bench or something, like whatever Animal Crossing people do, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Because that was another one that, like, unless you had like a GameCube, like, yeah, you basically like missed out on like the really popular one or whatever that people always talk about. And then yeah, like you said, then it went to like DSs, and it's like, who had a freaking DS other than like children at the time? Like, it wasn't really like a big deal to have a DS. So bringing it back to console, I'm super excited about as well, because another one that I missed that I think I will really like once I pick it up. I have absolutely no expectations other than, everyone says it's kind of like the whole Stardew Valley sort of situation. And now that I've sort of played games like that, I'm interested to see what the hype is about with Animal Crossing, because people are just like diehard about it. It just got released, I think, this week, that they're gonna have a Animal Crossing Switch version. It's like super pastel, cute, adorableness. So if anyone's interested in picking that up, there's that for you. People were going nut bar about that.
Yeah, like the thing I like about Animal Crossing is, yeah, it has like the same thing, like, oh, you have to, collect things, sell things to make money, to build up your house or whatever, upgrade your house. But
Mhm.
like, you could also run around and talk to people, build relationships. You could go to like this tailor and design your own designs for your shirts. You can make like, uh, you know, anything you wanted. Like you could make a skull if you were good at, pixel art or whatever.
Yeah.
So like the customizing is limitless on there. And what you do is totally different from what anyone else will do. So it's kind of like not the same thing every time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that sort of like, making your own adventure, building your own relationships, and kind of just like being like yourself in the game. And I hope that it's a pretty decent size in terms of like, all of the content that's provided. I hope it's something that is able to be played for hours and hours on end, kind of like a Stardew sort of situation, because games like that, it's like they never really like truly end. Maybe you get through, some sort of storyline thing with certain characters or whatever, but for the most part, you just keep expanding upon your house and doing whatever it is you do in there. So that kind of thing, like I said earlier, I'm all about replayability with games, so if that's something that I can keep coming back to, I'm really excited about it. And it's really, we were talking about it last week, how this is like the only big Nintendo launch this year, like Nintendo specific, because obviously they're gonna have things like Doom on Switch, but for one thing, that's not the way to play Doom, and for another thing, it's like Nintendo specific games. Usually, there's a big one like Pokemon and Mario and Zelda and things like that. This is really the only one that we know about right now that is
Yeah.
Nintendo exclusive, So I'm hoping that we get more. Like Bagman brought up earlier, like, maybe a Bayonetta, or I think we talked about last week, maybe like another Metroid. Like those are supposedly in the works, but we know nothing about like when they're going to come out or anything about the games themselves. So it's just kind of like, I feel like Nintendo is like hinging upon Animal Crossing right now. It's like the thing that they have that
Yeah.
they've actually announced. So
Like, I
I
know Animal Crossing's a big thing.
it
Like
is
it's not as big
big.
as Mario and whatnot, but it is like bigger than people kind of think.
Yeah, because, like, well, that's the thing is, like, I feel like this isn't like a Yoshi game, where it's like, oh, it's like big, but like not like, huge. Like, this is a big title for them, and it's something that's we've been waiting for since, like, something like the GameCube version. So definitely anticipated. It's just like, I do sort of worry that, like, that's all this is gonna be for Nintendo this year. Like, it used to be like, the first year it came out, we had like two big ass games, like their biggest IP, Zelda and Mario, came out, and it's like, the fact that we've kind of gotten like, it's kind of slowed down since like being those like Nintendo exclusives or whatever, to more like one big one a year. It's like this one's coming so soon in the year too. It's like there's nothing to really expect for the end of the year. It's just here's your big one right at the beginning of the year, and then I guess you just gotta keep playing that until next year, maybe, depending on what they can announce. Maybe we'll get more stuff at E3. Maybe they're just gonna keep leaning on the fact that you're gonna get like DLC for stuff like Pokemon and things like that. I
Yeah.
really don't expect there to be anything like a Breath of the Wild 2. I think that's not gonna be this year like people are hoping. So yeah.
Yeah, like it would be nice, but like I think Breath of the Wild 2 is still kind of in the works. But like
Oh,
the
yeah.
thing about Animal Crossing, I'm not sure if you played it before or not.
No, I've never touched one before,
Is
so that's why
that
I'm excited.
the game time is based on your clock.
Mhm.
So if you go in at 12 p.m., it's going to be, afternoon for there. So like if you go in at night, it's going to be nighttime there. So it's kind of like a game that takes longer to kind of do because it's based on real world time.
Yeah, it kind of stretches
Yeah.
it out because it feels like they're trying to put you into the world and like how it feels to actually like do those things in real time. If something's gonna take you 4 hours to make, you better bet your ass it's gonna take you 4 hours.
Yeah, or say like, oh, you could only catch this certain fish at like, after 9 p.m. You literally have to wait until 9 p.m. to go and do it, unless you like, you fudge it and, like change your system clock or whatever. But, like
Yeah.
if you do it like legit, you're going to have to wait until after 9 kind of thing.
Yeah, which is like super interesting because it's almost like a game. It kind of reminds me of like a mobile game where it's like it's something you'd have to keep with you throughout the day and then like pop in at certain times to do whatever it is you're trying to do. And that in itself is like the ultimate replayability because it's like kind of like when you have dailies in like a MMO or something where every day you got to do that thing or whatever and at this time and it's gonna become part of like people's schedule almost, and it's in that way going to be more like a lived in experience. So yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting, and again, like maybe that's all they need this year is something like that. Maybe they'll bring some sort of like DLC to it. I don't know if it's going to be like as big as like the expansions of Pokemon, but maybe they may even do like monthly drops of different like items you can build, or maybe they introduce like a new character or something. Like there are some possibilities I think for them to expand it, and I kind of hope that they do so that it just continues to have life past this year. But I think they need to do something in order to kind of keep people interested in their Switch, because unless you are buying like all of your indies there, or if you're buying stuff like Doom there, which I highly doubt, like the majority of people who are going to be playing stuff like that won't be buying stuff like Doom on the Switch. Other than that, you mostly got your exclusives to rely on. So like I was saying last week, this is probably going to be my Nintendo game this year, other than the Pokemon DLC I'll be hopping into, and then obviously stuff like Super Mario Maker goes on forever. But like in terms of just like your base game, this is basically gonna be it. This is gonna be the thing that I'm gonna be plugging away at for a while. So yeah.
Yeah, at least for now, because they might announce something later on, kind of thing. Like
Right.
like announce it in spring and be like, oh, it's coming out in fall or whatnot. Yeah, but as of like beginning of the year, like that's the only thing really that's coming out that's big. Like there might be like some smaller things like indie games coming out for Nintendo that are kind of exclusive, but other than that, there's not like any AAA titles or whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. Like something that's like very exclusively like Nintendo or whatever. Because there's obviously room for them to say more about Metroid and Bayonetta and things like that. But will they come out this year? That's really the biggest question, because I know at least for Metroid, that's just gone through like development hell. And then Bayonetta, we know nothing about. We haven't even heard shit about it. So it's just like, those could totally drop this year, but at the same time, I'm like worried. I'm like, are you gonna say something? Like, we gotta know something about it. We gotta get us hyped for it. But there's still plenty of room for them to announce something for like holiday season. I kind of hope that they do, just to again keep people on their Switch. Like that's the biggest thing is like you want to keep driving those hardware sales. You got to keep people on your device and buying the different games for it and stuff like that, because things like Breath of the Wild and Mario and things like that, like people have since bought them, played them, are done with them, whatever. So Everyone's always looking toward the brand new thing for their consoles, and their exclusives are really what drive their console sales, because things like Doom are not, you're going to want to play that on PC or PlayStation or whatever. So they need those big apps, those big exclusives to be able to keep driving those sales. I think they released their like numbers or something. I think it actually said that Switch might have sold better than Xbox or one of
Yeah,
those.
they've made more. They've sold more than the Xbox over its lifetime.
Yeah, which is like crazy. And I don't expect that to really like, you know, could potentially take a dip this year depending on, like however many people are still trying to buy things like Pokemon and things like that, because Pokemon's one of those that is like definitely a hardware seller. I think Animal Crossing will be too, especially considering they did put out a Animal Crossing version. So there's a potential that that trend will continue. But yeah, it's just like one of those things where it's like, if they are wanting to keep up that momentum into the holiday season, they gotta keep putting out those exclusives, because otherwise, there's really no other reason to buy the Nintendo consoles other than those exclusives and the random indies, if that is your indie machine. So yeah.
Yeah, 'cause they can't just survive off of DLC. Like I know Smash Bros is getting extra characters coming up, but that's not gonna kind of sustain the whole year of like, oh,
Right.
new character, it's so amazing. Let's everyone buy a Switch for whatever character's coming. Like that doesn't
Yeah,
really
because
do.
like if you are a Smash person, you most likely have a Switch by now. It's like it already released. You may be getting these new characters, but people aren't like hinging on the fact that they're gonna buy one for one character or something. Yeah, so
Exactly.
it's one of those
I know
games that
currently.
like Mario Kart, where you can always pick it up and put it down and do whatever with it. But at this point, it's like if you were interested in those things, you probably have already bought your Switch by now. So yeah.
Yeah, they could release a Mario Kart 9 because Mario Kart 8 is
Could.
just the one from the Wii U with all the bells and whistles on it. Like if they made a new Mario Kart, that would be good.
Yeah,
Great.
I mean, they've got like IP sitting around that they could totally act upon that we have not even heard about yet either. Like, I can only go off of the speculation that we've like seen, but there's plenty that they could still release. But yeah, like you said, I hope they don't rely on things like DLC, even for Pokemon, because the original game is definitely a gangbuster, but like I not everyone who bought that game is going to be getting like the DLC or be buying like a whole new Switch for two games essentially, like in one.
Yeah.
So yeah,
The
that's
good
more
thing
for
about
like the people who already have Pokemon, who love Pokemon and are replaying the first, the base game, that are going to want more, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly.
And
So
Link's Awakening 2 opens up the possibility of remastered of old Game Boy games and maybe some NES ones and stuff. Because
yeah,
I'm pretty sure that Link's Awakening was a big hit that sold pretty.
yeah, I think it did too. I didn't hear a whole lot about like how well that did, but like for the most part, I saw a lot of people playing it. I saw a lot of people loving it. I myself like actually picked it up and really enjoyed it. Never really beat it, but like I enjoyed what time that I did spend with it. So yeah, you're right. Like there is plenty of even backlog titles that they could bring up as well, that could be a big hit. Or some people are saying like even in the wake of a new Metroid title, just releasing like a trilogy would be a pretty big win for them, because people like me who may have never played like all of the Metroid games, who want to try them, or people who did and love them and want them on their newer consoles being like remastered or whatever. I think that'd be another like really big win for them in terms of like having more content out there that is exclusive to their console. I think that'd be really smart too. Kind
Yeah.
of like
Like
the,
if they just kind of did the thing like they have like the Nintendo classics or whatever, Nintendo Online, whatnot, and Super Nintendo
Mhm.
Online. Like if they somehow throughout this year put out like a Nintendo 64 online, I think that would kind of hold its own too, because
Mhm.
N64 has some great titles. It was kind of revolutionary in terms of like 3D Mario or 3D Zelda, kind of thing.
Yeah, and could you imagine if somehow they were able to bring like GameCube games to that online subscription? I mean, I don't know how hard it would be to like sort of emulate those, but that would be really cool too. Because again, I never like that was around the time that like I got like my PS2 and stuff like that, but I never actually had a GameCube. I just played like with other people's GameCubes and stuff. But I know
N64
it's
emulators have been pretty rough, so I would think anything higher than that still kind of
still
hard.
iffy. Yeah,
Like Sega Saturn emulators, I've heard too, they've been like really hard pressed to nail down like anything that's close to the original.
yeah, I think it's a big ask, but I know that there are a lot of beloved games from that console. So if they could somehow bring GameCube games like back to life on the Switch, that would be huge too. A lot of really good ones on there.
Yeah, I would think though, if anybody, like Nintendo, if they get like the original people who worked on those consoles, those would be the people who probably best be able to crack some kind of emulator.
Yeah. Or just, like I said, like I don't know how hard it would be, but like if they could even just remake it, like maybe not necessarily the textures and things, but just like make it so that it does work with current systems or whatever, and just re-releasing it that way. Pretty much how like a Metroid re-release would work instead of putting a fresh coat of paint on it, just basically releasing it as it was. Being able to do something like that, that'd be amazing. I don't know if it would necessarily be bundled in with the Switch Online, because that seems like even more bang for your buck that you'd be getting, and they probably think, okay, no, we're gonna need a little more money for this. Because I feel like people mostly buy the online for the online capability, not necessarily for those games, and that's a big value that they're just putting out there basically for free.
What online capability? There's no voice chat or party system.
True. It's mostly just the gateway, opening the gate to be able to use the goddamn online.
Oh yeah.
But
we gotta get the phone app so we can talk playing a Mario Tennis.
oh god, Mario Tennis. What
We're
is
actually here in like Discord even volunteered to Nintendo. They're like,
oh
let us build a in-system game chat.
please, oh my god, just even yeah, like let's just talk about freaking Nintendo Switch like features. Yeah, give me a freaking Discord. Where the hell is Netflix? Like even the most basic stuff, I'm like, hello. Or even
I
just
think Hulu's on it.
Hulu is
Maybe.
on it. Yeah, Netflix would be nice because Hulu, I think they might have recently gotten a download feature, but Netflix has had their whole like download feature like available for a while on like mobile and whatnot, or even PC. I think it had a download, but having it on Switch would be amazing too. Because like if you take like a plane trip and you're playing your games or whatever, and then you're like, I just feel like switching over to some TV or something, or a movie or something. Like you have all this like download stuff on your device itself instead of having to swap over to something like your phone. It's just like, I know it's not like most people watch on their phone, but for someone like me who might already have their Switch out, I don't typically play games on like my phone. I'll play them on my Switch, so being able to swap with all of my different media on one platform, I know it's not like a super duper asked for feature, but it's just a convenience thing that I think would be nice. So things like that. They've already killed the idea of having a new Switch model this year, so that's not anticipated for us anymore. I was kind of anticipating that.
Well, I saw a YouTube video about that. They said about how, like years ago, when that guy Reggie was in charge of Nintendo, he said, "Oh, we're not going to have any new Nintendo DS hardware." And the day after he said that, they announced something new.
Reggie.
So the YouTube channel did say that, like, that they may be saying that, but it doesn't mean that
Could be a
they're
lie.
going to be doing misdirection because they're not ready to reveal it yet.
Yeah, because I feel like we've seen so much shit like, oh, here's the blueprints and here's the rumors and stuff like that. It's like, who knows how much of that is real or fake. I totally anticipated some kind of, even if it was just a dock upgrade, some sort of something that allowed it to have better performance. I expected that. They already had the light come out, so it's like kind of like in the DS style. They had the DS like the regular DSs or whatever, and then they had like the 3DS XL. I'm expecting some kind of XL from the Switch, whether that means it's higher performance or maybe just bigger screen, maybe even bigger like actual like system body. I don't know, but something. I expected something, especially considering The hardware for this sort of like mobile market is just getting better and better with every year that passes. And this is what, the third year the Switch has been alive. So I thought maybe by the third year they'd have something like a new chip or something that we could put in there, maybe even more storage, things like that. But
Well,
I mean, like you said, maybe that's still happening. I don't know. Maybe they're just a big fat liar.
And it
well,
is
just
possible when they put out that new Switch that just had the better battery for more battery life, that could be where all this Switch Pro stuff came from, and it's just like got overblown and mis.
Maybe.
well, like they already released a second Switch though. I forget what it was called, but instead of like the white box or whatever, it's a red box that has like better battery life and better like overall performance.
Was it? I don't know that it was performance though. I know that it had a
Yeah,
better
I think it's just the
battery,
battery. Yeah, I think that's just it.
but that might have even
Yeah, I
just
think
been like an easy swap out sort of situation because you don't have to change
Yeah,
any
yeah.
of like the actual like
You
hardware
get like an
to.
extra hour to an hour and a half of battery.
Yeah, I think it's just a better battery, but like nothing like if there had been a Switch with like a brand new like GPU, CPU, whatever inside of it, I feel like people would have gone nuts trying to go figure out like. Plus the fact that like they didn't actually even like say it was like a new release like Switch. They just like changed the color, the SKU number or whatever changed, and then like that was it. So if you wanted the brand new one with the better battery, you had to like go look at the freaking barcode to figure out which one it was. I think if they actually had an upgrade, quote unquote, version of the Switch, they'd make it a way bigger deal than that. It'd be like the 3DS XL where it clearly says that it's a brand new kind. I think that one was more just like, yeah, we just happened to get a good deal on some batteries, so we're gonna swap them out and put them in there like that. But I'm
If they
waiting for
do
a
do
real one.
Pro, I would assume it's going to be around the same time as the PS5 and Xbox
Could
Series.
be. That could be some. Maybe they have the plans, but maybe they're like biding their time for when it's gonna release. And I also feel like if they're gonna, it's gonna be holiday time. It's not gonna be like middle of the year, beginning of the year. They're gonna want to hit that like Christmas time and get people to, you know, get buy all their kids the brand new big old Switches or whatever. So there's a chance that it may still happen, like Tom said, like maybe they're just bluffing and it is going to come out, but maybe they're not going to say anything until like E3 time or a direct or something like that. So there's still a chance, but that's what I've been holding out for the Switch, essentially because like I said, that there's not a whole lot of gangbuster like games coming out by the end of the year that we know about. So I thought maybe the end of the year would be a good time to release a hardware upgrade and not necessarily like a new game. Something that if they're trying to drive hardware sales, make a new Switch, that will get even people who own Switches now interested in buying new hardware. So I don't know. I'm not a business person,
It's
Yeah,
but
always
like
possible too that if one was planned, it could be something where it just wasn't working out. So that maybe one was planned, a Switch Pro, and then it got scrapped because sometimes you have that too, that things just don't work out the way you want them to.
right.
yeah, and if they do file it, it's just for their protection that they're gonna make it. Like most companies do, like like they buy out Diablo 3 sites, even though there's no like Diablo 3 expansion coming after the second, the first one. So that's kind of buy that to kind of protect its IP and whatnot, or like its intellectual.
Oh yeah, they also filed the blueprint for what looked like a N64 controller, which was leading people to believe they were going to do an N64 mini because you had, they did the NES mini, then the year after that was the SNES mini. So people assumed, oh, like the next year it's going to be the N64 mini, but one never came out. But around the time when you expect maybe to get announced, they did file a patent, and like the outline of it was, the exact diagram of an N64 controller.
And the
Yeah.
thing with that is, how are you gonna slide it on your dock? I mean, on your Switch. Because like you can
The
slide like
controller.
the NES controllers, because those are kind of flat. Like the NES and SNES controllers, gonna kind of slide them on because of the bar.
No, no,
The
no. I'm talking about like an
N64
N64 mini.
Yeah, like the N64 controller though.
Because
How
yeah,
are you gonna slide that on your Switch?
I
It's like kind
know.
of
Yeah.
bulky and rounded, and
I've seen a lot of people try to come up with concepts for like the GameCube controllers that slide onto the Switch. I was like, nah, dude, that's ugly.
Yeah, I saw
That's not
somebody do that.
happening.
Yeah, I saw somebody do that. Yeah, the Joy Cons that were designed to look like.
Yeah, I don't know how many more of those like minis they're going to do. I mean I like the concepts of them, especially for people who are nostalgic and want that hardware back and to be able to display it and play those games and stuff, but I'm of course like leaning more toward like, if you're gonna do anything with those older consoles and games and stuff, like just put it on your current hardware and find a way to bring that old hardware to the Switch, like you said with the NES Joy Cons, and then they had the GameCube control, like wired controller, not like Joy-Con style. But like that kind of thing, I'm more interested in probably than like a whole new like mini console. But that's just me. Again, if I'm gonna get like GameCube anything, I'd prefer to get like the games on the Switch and not necessarily like a GameCube mini sort of situation. But
I
yeah.
like that. The outcome
With
I'm
the
looking for with a Xbox, and well, Microsoft and Nintendo are in bed now. Like they're thinking about putting over like
Mhm.
Xbox Live on the Switch and whatnot. It would be great since Microsoft owns Rare if the Switch got like a remaster or just the original port of Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
'Cause that game is amazing. Oh my god.
Yeah, like in a lot of those, didn't they have something to do with like Donkey Kong or something? Or maybe I'm
Yeah, I
thinking of
think
something else.
originally,
Was
I
the
think
and they make the
Conker,
Donkey Kong Country games.
Yeah, didn't Rare make something like that?
yeah, Rare made Donkey Kong
Yeah, so they
Country,
kind of have
but they
like
also they
that.
made Conker.
Yeah. Like they kind of already have that sort of like relationship or whatever. Plus, like a lot of people were saying how maybe some of those characters would make it into Smash. Like I think, like Ukulele, I think already did stuff like that. So yeah, no, I having even more connections with Microsoft, I think, can only be better and better, especially if they brought the Xbox Game Pass over to Switch. That'd be hella rad. I don't know if that would ever happen, considering Xbox wants to sell their hardware and not Switch hardware, but
And
I think it'd
hopefully,
be
the
really
more
cool.
if Microsoft and Nintendo work well together, forces Sony to start playing ball instead of being
It's true.
like, we want to go it alone and be.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
right?
Nintendo and Sony used to work with each other, when they were making the Super Nintendo. They're gonna make it like CD based, but it's like something happened and they decided not to work together. So Super Nintendo, Nintendo made Super Nintendo, and then Sony started working on the PlayStation.
Hmm.
Yeah. The PlayStation was originally going to be a Super Nintendo attachment, and it, whatever reason, yeah, they didn't work out well, and they decided to part ways. And Sony's like, well, screw you, we're going to make our own.
Yeah. And especially considering like Sony and Nintendo are both like Asian based companies, whereas Microsoft is more of like a US based. So like kind of having like the Asian and US markets sort of collaborating is definitely interesting, considering the two Asian markets don't want to work together at all. And there, it's so much to the fact that like I was talking about Persona 5, the Royale version coming out later on, like still PlayStation, like they don't care to put it on any sort of Nintendo console, and it's just like, god damn it, like it just stop it, Sony, god damn it. I really hope that they open up their minds to doing more of that crossover stuff, because
Uh,
yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I think would work really well for the Switch if they would just allow it to be ported over.
it was
Yeah.
email leaks that had the president of Sony Corporation force Sony Pictures to work with Marvel Studios. Maybe we need somebody to hack the PlayStation division, leak out some of their emails or whatever, and something to make them look bad. And then the head of Sony Corporation will be like, work with the other game companies.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we need a Tom Holland for Nintendo who'll talk to the Sony bigwigs over on the gaming side. Be like, hey,
Yeah, there
we
you
want you to come back.
go. For real. All right, well, shit. I mean, I think we covered a lot of different games this episode. I think we've got 2020 pretty covered here. Of course, we're always gonna wait and see what else is going to be announced. I'm hoping maybe around like E3 time we'll be able to do another episode of like what's being announced for the end of the year and like what all we're going to be seeing for then. So, be really exciting, and like I said, uh at the end of this year, kind of seeing what went from our most anticipated games going toward what our game of the year is and seeing how any of those correlate, I think is going to be really interesting. But we've got a good lineup of games this year. And I am super excited to see and hopefully see all of these games come out and see what they do, because I mean there have been a lot of pushbacks this year already, so we'll see. But we've got a really good lineup, and I can't wait to see what this year brings. So thank you guys for hopping on the pod once again and discussing some of our anticipated games.
No problem.
And
problem.
hopefully we'll be back. I don't know. We don't really have any topics lined up yet for future podcasts, but we'll be back with something. So definitely stay tuned.
Something will happen during the week. Like something will blow up or something. Like, oh, let's talk about that. So, we'll at least get it by Wednesday or something. Like, okay,
yeah,
that
right.
happened. Let's talk about it.
Exactly. And of course, if anyone wants to join us on the podcast, I will kind of type in the Discord here, the link so you could join. We're obviously a streaming community, but we play a lot of games together, talk about games together, stuff like that. So if anyone's interested in doing that with us, feel free to join. And I will talk to you guys later.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
See you later.